So now I wanted to give you all a little introduction on Nikki Clinch, the fabulous Nikki Clinch, transforming her life from the depths of addiction to becoming a pioneer and leader in her field. Nikki Clinch doesn't just talk the talk, but continues to walk the walk. In everything she teaches, she's a true model of possibility and self-empowerment. Nikki is a transformational coach, integrative holistic counselor, and spiritual mentor with 20 years experience. She facilitates people to heal from past conditioning, limitations, and traumas, allowing them to come home to who they were meant to be. Nikki is a Hay House author of the newly published book, Surrender, Break Break Free of the Past, Realize Your Power, Live Beyond Your Story. She's gained the reputation as one of the leading transformational coaches in the UK and continues to help hundreds of people every year to transform their lives. A regular contributor to press articles, Nikki has written for Red, Psychologies, Metro, The Telegraph, The Times, Grazia, Sheerlux, and Stylist. Now please help me welcome Nikki Clinch.
Oh, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's always quite overwhelming hearing all of that being read out. That's all the stuff that I do, and that's important. But really, what really moves me is the journey that we travel and the life that we've lived. And I feel really honored to be able to be here and speak with you all today, particularly because this is the recovery conference. You know, I grew up in recovery. I literally grew up in recovery. And I'm going to tell you all about it in a minute. But it feels like such an honor also to be able to sit with you all and speak with you about this particular topic at this particular time on the planet. You know, I don't need to remind you all already know that we have been through an extraordinarily challenging time of change, and that we continue to be navigating our way through an extraordinary time of change on our planet, and how that has impacted the collective as a whole, and each of yours and each of mine and ours and our neighbors and our families' individual lives. That we are in a threshold of unknown, and being able to navigate our way through these unknown waters, these unknown stormy waters, from a space of trust and surrender is significant right now, which is why it's such an honor to be able to sit with you now and speak to you about this. I am being streamed in from New Zealand. Behind me is the New Zealand rainforest. That is where I live right now. And it is kind of mind-blowing that we are able to all gather together like this from all over the world and connect in these beautiful and deep and authentic human spaces. So important right now. So I'm going to be speaking to you about living from a space of trust and surrender. And this is not something that you need to do or get or find. It's not a strategy that you need to learn tools for in order to get to this destination. That's the first distinction that I want to make clear. Living from a space of trust and surrender is a field in which to come from into your life. It's a field in which to choose life from, to choose our actions from. It's a space in which we can live in, a space beyond reactions and compulsions, beyond fear and control, beyond the habitual, repetitive, mechanicalness of the human mind, of our minds, and beyond your stories of the trauma and the wounds and the experiences of your past. It's a space beyond all of that, a field in which to come into life from, where we do not need to continue bringing the past into our future with every step that we go. It's a field of possibility. And so, what does it take to live from this space? I mean, what even allows this space to become available? To live from a space of trust and surrender is an expansive shift in perception. It requires an actual shift in consciousness of who you think you are in the world and what is fundamentally possible and available for you beyond what you always already know of who you are and what you can or cannot tangibly see. We human beings are wired to survive. The design function of our human mind is to merely help us survive today. Our mind does not care whether we are happy or fulfilled today. Our mind's sole function is to make sure that we survive today long enough to procreate. That's it. It's not very romantic. And so if we continue to live from a space of survival, that is all we get, survival. And so the invitation here in this talk is that expansive shift in perception beyond survival, a space beyond what you always already know. To consciously choose to lean in to the unknown, to the uncertainty, instead of the survival instinct of pulling away and resisting. To consciously choose to lean in to the discomfort instead of pulling away and resisting. It sounds like a big ask, but so why would we do this? Why is this important? And how is this even possible? And I'm honored and I feel grateful to say that this is a space that I live in today. I literally run my business from here. I lead my team from here. I make my life choices from here. And it has transformed the way I live, the way I love, the way I parent, and who I am. But it was not always this way. In fact, for a lot of my life, it has been far from this. And so in order to be able to demonstrate to you the space of trust and surrender, I want to show you the blocks that block this space and also the invitations that allow us to step out of it. And to do that, I'm going to tell you stories. I'm going to tell you stories about my own life, which I believe are the best way to really teach about human life, is to hear human stories. Why? Because we hear so much of ourselves and each other. And that's where real healing belongs and becomes available. Before I start with telling you stories, I want to begin with asking you a question. So I can't see you, but I can feel you. And so wherever you are, wherever you're listening from and watching from, I would like to invite you to please close your eyes. Just close your eyes and take 2 deep breaths in. And as you allow yourself to settle with your eyes closed, allowing your breath to be slow and conscious, I want to ask you a question. If you already knew 100% that you are enough, that you are already whole and complete, and that you can trust yourself and life completely, how would your life change? What would become possible for you? What would you do differently that you're not doing right now? Keep your eyes closed. Let that in. Would you rest more today? Would you apply for that school or training that you've been dreaming of? Would you paint the painting that you've been wanting to paint? Would you write the book? Would you dance the dance? Would you tell someone that you love them? How would your life change? Take a moment to really let this in. Feel it through your entire body and soften into it and breathe. And now when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Now do me a favor. Whatever came up for you, if anything, from those questions, park that somewhere for now. Park it in the back of your mind, or if you have a moment, write it down on a piece of paper so that you don't forget. Just park it somewhere, because I'm going to come back to that question at the end. Okay, so I want to begin by telling you my first story. This story is a phase in my life that I call survival. 22 years ago, I was a fall down drug addict, alcoholic, bulimic, anorexic. I was getting high every day, and I was addicted to crack and cocaine. I was getting drunk every day. In fact, I was going out with the landlord of the pub next door, who I didn't particularly like, purely because I wanted to get access to as much alcohol whenever I wanted and whenever I could. I was heavily bulimic, and I had my head down the toilet 12 to 15 times a day. All the blood vessels in my cheeks had burst, and I was ruthlessly underweight and undernourished. I had been fired from every job that I had ever had. I was thousands of pounds in debt, and I had lied to and hurt everybody that had ever loved me. I was in a pretty bad way. And I was only 20. And I had been an active addict for already a decade of my life. In my final days of my addiction, a doctor told me that if I were to continue to live my life like that, I was never going to make it to 30. Thank God I'm now 42. I was on the precipice of my life, where I really only had two choices. And one was, I either wasn't going to make it, or I was going to have to leap into something completely unknown. Now, when I look back on that phase of my life, particularly those final days, I realize now with hindsight that it wasn't actually the substances or even the eating disorders that was going to kill me. It was the deeply rooted sense that who I was beneath it all was bad. I was stuck in an internal battle an internal conflict between my mind and my being, a battle of self-hate and fear and shame and low self-worth. And I was living in a constant state of compulsions and reactions, anything to avoid having to be with or feel any of the experiences that were moving through me. My mind had become both my enemy and my savior, keeping me locked in a constant state of obsession and distraction. I was stuck in a state of resistance. I was in survival. I remember that I had nothing to hold on to. I felt like there was nothing safe, nothing I could trust. I was scared all the time, and the fear was living me like I had been hijacked. In my final day of that phase of my life, I woke up that morning, and for a few milliseconds, you know, when you open your eyes when you've been sleeping, and you first open your eyes and you have a tiny little moment of peace before your mind becomes noisy. Well, I had that moment, millisecond of reprieve, and then the whole barrage of noise started just flooding my mind, remembering about how I was living and who I thought I was and what I'd done the night before, and the shame and the guilt and the fear and everything just completely inundated me. And I started to break down and cry. The thought of living another 40, 50 years like that just seemed like hell. I couldn't do it anymore. And I found a way to peel myself off out of my bed, and I filed my way through my living room, through all the mess from the night before, and something knocked me to the floor. And as I hit the living room floor with my knees, I broke down again in tears. And I must have been on that floor crying, sobbing for an hour. And it felt like I was crying for everything that I had ever done, everything I thought I was never going to be able to do, everything that I had never been able to say, everything that I had wanted to say but not been able to access. I was just crying grief endlessly, what felt like endless. And then something pretty remarkable happened. A peace washed over me that I'd never experienced before. It was like a quietness that washed over me. And I found myself whispering these words: I really want to live, but I don't know how. I surrender. And something in my whole body just released. It was like a relief overtook me. I felt like something had lifted. Now, I didn't consciously know it at the time, but when I look back now, I realized that what I had done is I had lent into the unknown. I had made a choice that I was going to trust something else, which meant and allowed me to release the grip of what I had always already known. Was able to surrender what I knew and lean in to something else. Right there and then, unconsciously, I made a decision to trust, even if it seemed impossible. Within an hour, I was in a doctor's office, and I was telling the doctor everything about how I was living my life. Within 2 days, I was in treatment. I had a therapist, I was going to meetings, and I was in recovery. And it was a relief. And I did everything that I needed to do. I did everything that was asked of me. I was a good recovery girl, and I was willing to do anything. And so for the first few years, that's what my full-time job was. And I started to get better. I I went to the meetings, I went to my therapy, I did my journaling, I got clean, I got sober, I stopped being bulimic. I just did everything that I was told that I needed to do. And then after a while, I started to look better. And I was significantly, feeling better. And then I started to like this feeling better feeling. And I started to discover things like yoga and meditation and green juice and plant-based eating and running. And feeling better felt so good. And so I really made feeling better my full-time job. And then I just kept doing as the best that I could to be as good as I could be. And after quite a few years, from the outside in, everybody thought that I was better. And I looked better and I ticked all the boxes. I was now had a healthy body and I kind of looked shiny and pretty, and I had a job now, and I wasn't like falling down and being a drug addict. I was acceptable to society. But behind closed doors, something was still happening. I found myself continuously getting stuck in the same repeated patterns. I would do all these things that were good. I would drink the green juice and I would eat the perfect food and I would take myself to yoga and I would do my meditation, and I was like, if I can just be good, well then what? Then what? And then of course I wasn't able to sustain it, and I would make a mistake, or I would do something that I would be unhappy with myself for, and then I would start spiraling into this place of shame and self-hate and fear, and the internal battle would kick off again, and I would end up depleted and burnt out, and then I would collapse and I would feel bad that I was bad. And then I would get up a few days later and I would try to be good again. And now I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to be good doing this, and I'm going to be good doing this. And then lo and behold, I'd find myself making mistakes again, and I would start to go round and round and round in the same cycle over and over and over again. Something was driving my life that was keeping me stuck. I was trying so hard to be good. Why? Because deep down, I still thought I was bad. I was trying to overcompensate for the bad that I thought that I was, in the same way that I was doing it as an active addict. I still wasn't free. I was still struggling with the same patterns that I was struggling with in addiction. Even though active addiction looked a lot messier and a lot less acceptable to society, I was still coming from the same place as when I was in addiction. The same fears and unworthiness and resistance was driving me. I wanted to do whatever I could to get away from the experiences that I couldn't bear to be with, rising in myself. I was still in survival. And so what is survival? Survival is a way of being where we are trying to get somewhere in order from somewhere. And the place in between where we're trying to get and we're trying to get away from, we call our life. But that's not living, that's surviving. We get stuck in a story about our life and about who we think we are in that life. And then we use our life to try and do something about that story and about our life. In my years of doing this work, I have worked with a lot of people all over the world, many, many different cultures. And I count myself privileged enough to have worked with people in very intimate and deep healing spaces. I'm going to go back, Barb, and talk about what survival is again in a second. Don't you worry. I'm talking about it now. The gift of being able to work with people in deep healing spaces is that most of the time, in fact, all of the time, they tell me the truth about themselves. They tell me the truth about what they struggle with, what they fear, what they don't even want themselves to see in themselves. They tell me about what they want. And what I have learned from this privilege of working with many human beings in these deep spaces is this. We human beings have enormous differences. We have so many things to distinguish us as different from each other. We have the color of our skin, the language that we speak, the stories that we come from in our childhood, the cultural agreements that we have, the countries that we live, the food that we eat. There are so many differences that we can use, and they are differences. They are genuinely real differences. But one thing that I have learned is this, is that when you go deeper, like to the spaces that I have sat with human beings, I have discovered that we are not only just similar, we are the same. Human beings beneath the surface are the same. We suffer from the same source of suffering. We suffer from the same longings. Human beings are the kind of beings that get caught in this cycle of trying to get somewhere by trying to get away from somewhere. We get caught in a cycle of identifying with the story that we have about our life, the story that we have about who we are in our life. And then we use our life to try and do something about that story about who we are. We have pictures in our mind of where we need to get to, that if we can just get there, well, then it will fix where we're trying to get away from. But as long as we're trying to get somewhere by trying to get away from somewhere, we are not in the present. We are missing the present moment, and that is survival. This is not living. Living is when we are able to be in the experience of life in the present. Survival is when we're trying to do something about the experience of life and the story that we have about the experience of life. As long as we are trying to get somewhere to fix where we're trying to get away from, we are stuck in the past. We are stuck in the memories and the conditioning from our past, and we are bringing our past into our future with every step that we take. For me, I thought that if I could just be more perfect, if I could just be better, if I could just be thinner, eat cleaner, be tidier, be more lovable, be more wanted. If I could just do better, well, then maybe of my past. Can you guys just tell me that you can hear me properly? Just right here, just so that I know you can hear me properly. Oh, good. Thanks, Terry. It's a bit choppy. Here we go. You better? Okay, good. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Am I back? Okay, good. Good. I'm glad I'm back. I'm sorry. Well, I guess that's the technical challenges that we have to deal with. Thank you so much. Okay. You see, for me, even when I was better in the early stage of my recovery, I was still trying to be good and more successful and more lovable and more perfect. And I could just get there, then I might be able to get away from what I was trying to get away from. My past was still driving my present. The story of I'm bad was still driving my present. Yeah, perfect place to practice surrender. I hope you guys can hear me now. I've been able to change the internet setting. Good. Okay. You know, when I was a little girl, my mother was really angry. She suffers from bipolar, and my father left her when I was a baby. It was in extraordinary amounts of pain when I was a little girl. And she would lose her temper a lot. She would be angry almost all the time in her ways of dealing with life. Now, of course, as a little girl, I didn't understand the intricacies and the nuances of human life then. I only thought that it must be about me. It must be that I'm doing something bad. It must be because I am bad. I told myself that I am bad. And that story is one that I identified with and came into my life from every moment from there onwards. My whole life up until that point had been either finding evidence to prove that I was bad or to overcompensate for it by being good. Searching outside of myself to try and do something about the I'm bad story, trying to get somewhere else so that I could one day be good. And this is the paradox of the human condition. This is called the vicious circle that we get stuck in. This is survival. So in that moment for me, I knew I had two choices once again, that I either stayed the same and continued this repeated round and round hamster wheel, or once again to choose to lean into the unknown, to choose trust and surrender the resistance. I needed to stop running and stop trying to fix and start leaning in to being with the experiences that were moving within me in the present. You see, you can never have enough of what you never really wanted. There will never be enough green juice or validation or the perfect body or money in your bank account or success when what you really want, or who's looking through your eyes, is a 4-year-old girl who wants her mother to love her. Only when we're able to truly be with the experiences of our past here in the present are we able to heal. Only when we're able to surrender the resistance, the running, the trying, the surviving, and start to be with what is here now, rising in us in the present, that is where we heal. Life only exists in the present. Leaning into the discomfort, leaning into the unknown. And so that is story number 1. And so I want to tell you my second story. This second story is the next phase of my life, and I like to call this phase love and safety. A few years later, from story number 1, I was on my way to work and I must have been caught up in, noise in my mind because I don't remember the tube ride that I was on. I was kind of just on my way to work and mindlessly kind of walking through the crowds and heading to the office. I was a secretary at the time. And I got a phone call, and it was my sister. And the moment that I heard her voice, I knew that something was wrong. And my stepfather had died suddenly. He just didn't wake up that morning. And he had died alone in a hotel room in Hong Kong. He'd gone over there to get his visa renewed, and he just didn't wake up. It was the first time I had experienced death with anybody close to me, anybody that I loved dearly, and it completely crumbled my whole world. How could I have been 1 minute walking through the crowds of London in a sort of mindless, slightly obsessive state, to suddenly my whole world crumbling and someone that I'd loved with all my heart was gone? I know when I look back on it that my stepfather's death was one of the greatest gifts he could have given me. Because there's nothing quite like experiencing death to wake you up from the reality of your life. When I came back from his funeral, it was like nothing had changed, yet everything was different. I looked at my life. I had done what I needed to do to get it tidy and to feel better. Now I was starting to be willing to be with the experiences that move through me. But if I was truly going to be on the last day of my life and I looked back on it, would I feel like I used it well? If I wasn't trying to be good in order to not be bad, well, then what do I truly want for my life? What do I love? What do I care about? What brings me joy? If my life were to end tomorrow, would I be proud by the choices that I made? I knew there and then that I had to relook at why I was not following my heart. I had to reevaluate my relationship with trust. And when I started to look deeper into it, I realized something that surprised me. I didn't trust myself. I'd made so many mistakes. I'd done things that just felt to me unforgivable. How could I trust myself? You see, in my study and time working with human beings, I have discovered that there are two kinds of trust in which human beings often find themselves in. The first one is a childlike trust, where we trust so completely in someone or something outside of ourselves, and we give everything of ourselves to that someone or something. But then any sign of the slightest imperfection or mistake or untrustworthiness or evidence of untrustworthiness, we immediately withdraw and pull away, and we go right back into our protective survival patterns. This was the kind of trust that I had, not only with myself, but in every relationship I'd ever been with. And then there's a more mature kind of trust. A trust in the being of who you are beyond the behavior, who you are beyond the stories, who you are beyond what you do or what you think or what you say. I knew I was being in childlike trust with myself. But if I was truly going to start building a life that I felt like I loved, I was going to have to start trusting myself in a deeper way. And so I looked at my life. What was so untrustworthy? And I realized using as evidence to why I couldn't trust myself was things that I had done, things that I had said, things that I had thought. But I'm not my behavior. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my beliefs. In fact, when I looked deeper, even when I was in addiction, I was trying to solve a problem. I was trying to find connection. I was trying to find peace. I was trying to find freedom. I was just looking for it in all the wrong places. And then when I came into recovery, I was doing the same thing again. I realized that when I look deeply at the being of who I am, I've always been trying to do my best. Wow. And I had kept going no matter what. I made a decision then and there that I was going to trust who I truly am, beyond the story, beyond behaviors, to trust in a deeper part of me, knowing that I was going to make mistakes, knowing that I was going to not know things, knowing I was going to be human, but I could trust the being beyond it all. And so this next phase of my life was where I started to build safety. I started to listen to my heart, not my mind. You know, Zen masters call the heart, the space of the heart, the seat of consciousness, the seat of truth. Ah, has it gone choppy again? Let me know if you can hear me. Just give me a yes. It's just helpful for me to be able to see. Okay, good. Oh, good. Thank you. Shall I turn the video off, Teresa? Is it better if I turn it off? Shall Teresa give me some guidance here if this is, it might help. Okay, I'm going to turn the video. Hearing is good, visual is not so good. Okay, all right. Well, either, let me turn the video off and then you guys can hear me there. Okay, all right, good. We're going to do this by sound now. Good, because the sound is important. Good. Okay, right. So I started to listen to my heart. Zen masters call the heart, the space of the heart, the seat of consciousness, the seat of truth. It's not like society teaches us about the heart, like it's this place of romance. No, the heart is the space of truth, your seat of consciousness. There's no story in the heart. There's no fear in the heart. In Chinese medicine, the heart is the house of Shen, where you go to for all answers. And so I started for the first time listening to my heart. Oh, but your visual presence lights up and comes through. Okay, this is what we're going to do, guys. I'm going to keep my video on and we're going to do it imperfectly. If I freeze, then that's fine. We'll just do it the best that we can. Good. Okay. So what I started to do is I started to listen. I followed my heart. I left my full-time job and I decided that I wanted to help other people heal. And I applied to go back to school. I found this training that I really wanted to train as an integrative counselor and train in Chinese medicine. But I contacted the training and they told me they were full. They told me that there were no spaces, but I kept listening anyway. I said, interview me, let me apply. And so he did. 2 weeks later, I find out that 2 spaces had opened up. Before I knew it, I was on a 4-year training. I started listening that I needed to end a painful relationship and live on my own. I started to listen that I needed to start. I went to the Amazon jungle and I started working with plant medicine. This phase just kept leading me of listening to my heart. 6 months later, living on my own in London, returning from the Amazon, I met my husband. 1 year later after that, I graduated and I was living with him and I launched my business. Each step that I took into the unknown, I would feel the same feelings of fear. I would feel the same feelings of shame that moved through me from the past, but I had made a commitment to be with them. and they would move through me, and then they would pass. Each step required me to listen deeply to something deeper beyond my mind, beyond the past. Each time, the trust I built with myself grew, and I started to feel safer within myself. And as the sense of safety built, the trust grew stronger, and the risks I was willing to take grew bigger. You are not your thoughts. You are not your behavior. You are not your mistakes. You're not your trauma. You're not your story. Who you are is being beyond all of this. Make a decision to trust the being that you are beyond the noise. So you too can start to build a sense of safety and start following your own heart. Let that lead you through your life. Okay. Now I'm going to finish with my final story. And this story, this phase of my life, is called listening. Over the years, I had begun deepening my trust in myself and in the unknown. I started to participate in a deeper listening with life, learning how to listen to life rather than project my interpretations onto life everywhere I go. You see, most human beings are not really listening. You see, listening is only listening if we do not already know what is coming next. I'm going to say that again. Listening is only listening if we do not already know what is coming next. If we've already decided, even unconsciously in our mind, what is coming next, we're not listening. We are projecting. We are projecting our mind noise onto the present. That's not listening. Listening is listening into the space of unknown and being in an active participation in the present moment. Learning how to truly listen to life is learning how to live in the present, how to dance with the present moment and respond step by step beyond the mind, from a space beyond the noise. Last year, during the pandemic in London, where things were pretty terrible, my daughter had been out of school for 6 months by now, and I could see that the light was starting to disappear from her eyes. She was starting to become depressed. She was 7 years old then. And I knew I was starting to get a very strong calling that it was time for us to leave. My husband is a Kiwi. He has been wanting to move back here since as long as I've known him, but I always pushed it off. It never felt like the right time. Halfway through last year, I was like, I heard it. It was like, it's time now. It's time to leap. It's time to jump into the unknown. And so we started to do things that seemed logically completely insane. In the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of lockdown, we put our house up for sale. We sold everything most things that we had. We were applying to try and get me into a country where they had closed the borders and they weren't giving visas to anybody. Logically, it seemed insane. But what I was hearing from life was so clear. It was crystal clear. And I kept saying to my husband, trust, I can hear it. We are meant to follow this calling. Somehow our house sold to a lovely couple who are now building a family there. Somehow miracles started to happen. Like we had applied for me to have a permanent residency, but then immigration told us they were no longer accepting any more applications. But they managed to give me a visitor's visa to get me over the border. I wasn't going to be allowed to work. I was only going to have to be able to stay for 3 months. But we thought, okay, that's a good first step. Will get me over the border. Then we found out that the day that we were meant to fly, there was a strike at Heathrow Airport. We decided to get in the cab and go anyway. And then we got to the airport and there were all these difficulties about whether it was or was not allowed to, people were allowed to fly that day. But somehow they let us on the plane. We just kept listening to this space and taking the next step. When we were on the plane, me, my 7-year-old daughter, my 2-year-old son, and my husband. When we landed in Singapore, I turned my phone on and I started to cry because there was an email in my inbox saying that I had been awarded a permanent residency. And the day that the residency began was the day that I was landing in New Zealand. It was like God had come and sat in that plane with me. I knew that I could trust life. When we landed in New Zealand, I was a resident, and we just kept following the next step. We found our house, we put our kids in school, and we now live here on the edge of the rainforest. The biggest choice of all is first leaning into the unknown and then making the decision to trust who you truly are. And then, above all, choosing to trust life. Life will always find ways to flow. Life beyond the mind, beyond the stories of your past. When we truly are able to listen to life, we are in the present. It's like being in a dance with life without really knowing what the next steps will be. But you're awake enough to be able to hear the music. Neither one of you is leading the other. You're just listening deep enough to be able to flow. You know, when I look at where we are right now on our planet, beyond the stories, beyond the opinions, beyond the beliefs and the views, what I see is we as humanity are on the threshold of change. That we are being given an invitation to come out of an old way of being human, a way that has been led by fear, a way that has been led by survival, and be gifted with the invitation to step into a new domain, a new paradigm of living, led by trust, led by a space beyond mind, beyond the stories, beyond the trauma, beyond survival. And that begins with you and me. So before I finish, I want to read you a chapter. Not the whole chapter, don't worry, Teresa. I want to read you a section from my book. This is my book, Surrender. Break free of the past, realize your power, and live beyond your story. This is available anywhere that you can buy books. I want to read you this last bit, which is the last section of the book. My pain is your pain. My suffering is your suffering. We are not separate entities here on this earth. What we've carried has not just happened randomly. It's all part of the sequence of life that has gone before us and life around us and after us. We're all an extension of each other. When one of us finds the courage to keep following this calling to heal, it helps us all break free of the confines of the stories, the conditioning, the survival. It helps us all to face the past and be with it fully right here in the present, in service of bringing wholeness to what we carry that is in separation. We are all one species, and we are all alive beings, integrated into the fabric of life itself. Every moment of trauma we've received and inherited, we turn on ourselves, creating more separation that we then act out into the world. The sequence is endless and will continue to be endless unless we're willing to participate in creating change. Consider the problems we face now on our planet, the issues around climate, land, and seas, the extinction of animals, the suffering from hunger, poverty, and homelessness, the utterly unequal distribution of wealth and privilege and sovereignty, the oppression, racism, separation. Every one of these major issues is a direct consequence of human beings leading from a place of fear and separation, stuck in survival, confined within the story, blinding us from seeing more clearly. But we are not our trauma. We are not our stories. We are not separate. Who we are is wholeness. Who we are is life itself. Everything is alive. And we cannot create change on our planet by coming from the same place that caused the problems in the first place. You, and I'm speaking to you, are not merely just one amongst billions on this planet. You are an integral, fundamental part of the whole. Please do not think that who you are being in this world is too small to make a difference. In fact, who you are being makes the world of difference. You are a thread in the sequence to which and through which we are all connected. And so I want to come back to the question that I started with at the beginning. If you already knew that you were enough, if you already knew that you are whole, if you knew that you could trust completely, how would your life change today? What would you do differently? How would you be? So, thank you all so much. I can see that there is a DM here. I think now I realize I'm not sure who I truly am. I strive to be authentic. Well, not knowing who you truly are is a great place to be. And the not knowing. Everything is from the past. All new possibility is in the not knowing. Sit there for a lot longer than you might hear something truthful and new. Thank you all so much. I'm so grateful to you. I love you all so much. Wherever you all are on the planet, I hope this message has landed in your heart.